Hey everyone! Before we get into the video, I want to give a quick shout out to all the users who recently subscribed to my channel. As cheesy as it sounds, it means the world to me, and it gives me all the encouragement I need to keep this channel going. Here I have compiled my thoughts on Chapter Approved 2018 and Vigilus Defiant. I'm sure that most people who care about these books have already watched some of the bigger YouTube channels review them, but since I'm trying to make a YouTube channel which focuses on Warhammer 40k, I feel an obligation not to ignore this release. And since I am just a regular dude, I had to wait until I finally received my copy to actually get my eyes on these sweet books. Regardless, I'll do my best to be brief with my points, as there's a ton of content across these two epic tomes. Let's start off first with Chapter Approved. Similar to last year's Custom Land Raiders, OpenPlay offers looted wagons based off of three distinct chassis: carts, wagons, and battle fortresses. And while these are all really cool, I can't help but empathize with the disappointed orc players and be a little saddened by the restriction of these units to open play. But I kind of get it. After all, I've always had the notion the more open a system is, the more prone it is to becoming imbalanced. So I will assume the choice to limit it to open play is for the collective good. Another fun offering for open play is the ability to create your own custom characters. And while I pretty much do this anyways in my match play games, it's nice to see Games Workshop encourage it with some official modifiers. Across 4 tables, you can create 3 levels for your own custom named character. Hero, which equates to 4 selections, Mighty Hero, which allows for 6, and Legendary Hero, which allows for 8. And my god, they weren't kidding about being a Legendary Hero, as choosing 8 additional abilities puts your character on par with some of the best named heroes in the game. Check this out. So here is my warlord for my Salamander's army. Totally not Thanos, Primaris Captain Januga. He is armed with a Power Fist and Plasma Pistol. As a captain, Rites of Battle grants him a reroll hit rolls of 1 aura, and Iron Halo gives him a 4-up invulnerable save. His warlord trait is Anvil of Strength, which adds 1 to his strength characteristic, bringing it to 5. Unfortunately, the Relic Power Fist selection is exclusive to Crimson Fists, so instead I opted for the Salamander's Mantle, which adds 1 to his toughness characteristic, and in times of great need I can spend 3 CP to make him a Chapter Master. To me, he already feels pretty epic, but now I will proceed to add 8 selections from these tables. From the characteristics table, I will take Divine Protection, increasing his invulnerable save to 3+, and Heroic Constitution, which increases his wounds by 1, bringing them up to 7. Next will be Ferocious Combatant, which adds 1 to his attacks. Since his Power Fist is less reliable, I feel good about that choice. Now he is pretty much as scary as a Custodes Shield Captain on foot. From the Weapon Improvements table, I will take Artificer Weapon, which adds 1 to the damage characteristic of a weapon, bringing his Power Fist to D3+1 damage, which I feel is pretty fitting since Salamanders are artisan weaponsmiths, and now I can finally represent my converted Power Fist with these rules. So looking at the additional abilities table, I'm going to take Resilient, which gives him a 5-up Ignore Wounds, Indomitable, which causes damage suffered by him to be halved rounding up, and Hard to Kill, which causes wound rolls of 1, 2, or 3 to fail, even if they would otherwise be a success. Now this guy is ridiculously stacked with abilities, but I can still make one more selection, so why not choose Impervious, allowing him to regenerate 1 wound at the start of each turn. Now look at this data sheet, truly legendary stuff. So you can see what happens when we take a straightforward melee beatstick type build, but you can create a whole variety of different themes across the 4 tables. And as OP as this unit is looking now, it's still pretty moderate. Imagine using this table on a Shield Captain, or Demon Prince, or a Tank Commander. It could easily get out of control, but that's why it's for open play. Closing thoughts. I don't run open play games all that much, but I could see myself referencing these tables for campaign rewards for characters. Speaking of campaigns, the narrative play section opens up with Battle Honors, which is a pretty in-depth system. I can best sum it up as a framework for squads to gain EXP and earn new abilities over the course of a campaign, which is a pretty nice inclusion within the book. Cities of Death. This section offers a selection of 6 different missions, and some custom rules for Cities of Death games, all of which I find to be pretty cool, and for me is reminiscent of Kill Team. And the one rule in particular that does this for me is Obscured Targets, which works like it does in Kill Team, causing -1 to hit if all models of an infantry unit are obscured from the firer, but also vehicles as well if they are at least 50% obscured. It's great to see better rules for vehicles, even if it is for a specialized game mode. Now, here's the biggest, most important, and most impactful portion of the book as it pertains to the game. Here in the match play section, we have 12 new missions to play, 6 Eternal War and 6 Maelstrom of War. But what is key about these missions is that they have altered the core of the game. You see, one of the glaring issues I had with 8th edition was the advantage players gained simply from winning a roll-off to go first. A simple die roll fundamentally slanted the game in that player's favor, which I think we can all agree is pretty awful. Now these missions have done a good job to remove this issue through 4 changes. The first of which is acceptable casualties. A rule that removes the sudden death rule has been applied to all the missions in Chapter Approved, meaning you can no longer auto-win from tabling your opponent, placing greater importance on playing to the mission. First Strike. Finally, we have a replacement for First Blood, with a variant rule that is achievable by both players. Point number 3, Eternal War missions now score points at the end of the battle round, which further balances going second, granting players a chance to deny or obtain control based off of the first player's choices. And Refined Strategy, which allows you to remove 6 cards from your objectives deck in Maelstrom of War games, which lessens the likelihood of poor objective draws, adding a very slight deck building element to your Maelstrom games. But the most important alteration is that deployment has changed. The player who is going first deploys their entire army, then the player going second can counter-deploy. This is huge. Before this, not knowing during deployment if you were going first or not caused an Alpha Strike meta to develop, and honestly I feel that was the reason why we saw a lot of the changes seen over 2018's FAQs. But now with this new paradigm, going second is not a surprise you need to mitigate for during deployment, and if the player going second seizes the initiative, you still have access to the prepared position stratagem. Now at the time of this recording, I've actually only been able to play 3 of the new missions, since I only got the book when it was officially released. But based on those games, and from what I'm seeing on battle reports, the system is an improvement, greatly improving balance and increasing the enjoyment overall. In fact, I don't think I'll be going back to the older systems, and I'll probably try to take these changes and apply them to the missions from the basic rulebook and the Chapter Approved 2017 missions as well. I have never actually played a game against Sisters in 8th edition, so I can't speak to the improvements or satisfaction with the Beta Codex rules. However, changing Acts of Faith to a faith point based system does seem really cool as an army mechanic. This was my introduction to the 8, and I can't help but like what I see in this book. The Farsight Enclave are a narratively significant Tau faction, and I have a hunch that these rules are going to encourage their appearance on the tabletop. I also like what I see rule-wise as well. 1120 points gets you the 8 characters and 14 drones, which occupy a single Lord of War slot. Their war gear is preset, but also includes some relics, such as the Puretide Engram chip, Fusion Blades, and the Onager Gauntlet. Surprisingly, Commander Farsight must be your warlord, which from a narrative perspective is a nice rule to see. This has been covered by several other chapter-approved reviews, so I don't see much sense in me repeating what you guys probably already know. A few things I do wish to mention: confirmation on all Intercessor Sergeants, regardless of codex, can now use Power Fist, Chainswords, or Power Swords. For those who have watched my video on aggressors, Chapter Approved has adjusted them so that Flamestorm aggressors are now 1 point cheaper than Boltstorm aggressors, which in my opinion still isn't enough, as all the pros that Boltstorm offer for 1 point is absolutely worth it. And while several Forge World units did have their points adjusted, still no changes to Braearth Ashmantle has me bummed out. I was really hoping to get some encouragement in order to finish my conversion. Look, I understand he's a tough unit, but I can't wrap my head around why he's costed the same as Rebute Gilliman at 400 points. I mean, it's absurd, especially when the Swarm Lord has gone down to 250. I'm beside myself on this one, as I assumed it was an obvious change, and when rumors began circulating of named characters dropping points across the board, I figured Braearth was a shoo-in. And looking at the releases so far in 8th edition, I am fairly confident that the Salamander's Primarch, Vulcan, won't be returning anytime soon. But a named character interred in a Dreadnought built by our Primarch? That is a close second I will gladly accept. But at 400 points, he doesn't bring nearly enough value. Perhaps I should make a video to plead this case to Games Workshop for a points reduction, as this epic character is way overcosted. That wraps up my thoughts on Chapter Approved. Let's take a quick look at Vigilus Defiant. The first 115 pages of this book is all fluff, covering the narrative on Vigilus so far, locations of contention, and the forces involved. And without spoiling anything, it is truly awesome, essentially providing context to all the boxed releases we've seen this year. The book does a great job of making Vigilus feel like the next major plot thread of 8th edition. Getting into the game offerings of the book, it includes a framework for organizing Vigilus campaigns, 12 missions total, 6 Crucible and 6 Echoes of War. On top of those, there are also 6 battle zones and 6 war zone rules, which can be summed up as modifiers providing additional narrative or thematic elements to mimic the conditions of the battles on Vigilus. The first element in the faction rules section is specialist attachments. So, when rumors began to trickle in that formations were back, I got real excited. You see, I got my hopes way up. I have always made my stance on Soup pretty clear. That being, I think it causes inherent imbalance within the game. And I assumed that these formations were going to be GW's answer to balance things by offering specialist attachments to armies which were pure. When I found out this wasn't the case, and that you had to pay 1 additional CP to gain access to these buffs, I was pretty perturbed to say the least, because Soup armies also happen to have more expendable CP. But I thought about it, and from what I understand, the 1 CP cost which activates the detachment also gives you a free relic, which definitely makes it an easier pill to swallow. And from what I can tell, none of these detachments appear to be game-breaking. Their main focus seems to just offer alternate strategies and flavors for you to employ. Wow, Calgar is looking real good, and his new rules are just as attractive. In Primaris mode, his main stats have been up to Toughness 5, his wounds have been up to 8, and his attacks increased to 6. His war gear is the same, minus the Relic Blade, and he kept all of his abilities, having the damage he receives, granting 2 CP if he's your Warlord, and a 4-up invulnerable save. And his points didn't go up either. I honestly think he's an auto-take if you play Ultramarines, when the points limit is too low to bring Guilliman. Another amazing model, and narratively, he is real cool. But his rule set is a little underwhelming to say the least. He has a standard stat line of a jump pack lord, his Hell Spear is a shooting weapon, strength 5, AP -3, and damage D3. And in melee, he only has a regular lightning claw. Ability wise, he has a standard 4-up invuln of a Chaos Lord, but his aura is like a chaplain, only for raptors. He has an 18-inch minus leadership bubble, so that's something. I don't know, he's a weird unit. You see, when the model was teased, I immediately thought, oh man, this dude is gonna deep strike in with Warp Talons and do something to help them to get into combat. Something like this. World Claimer. Roll a 3d6 to determine Harkin's charge distance instead of 2d6 if the unit was hit by his Hell Spear in the previous shooting phase. You know, cause he's the World Claimer. He should mark his targets with his spear, and he's gotta go get his spear, so I assumed he'd be the guy you'd use to declare charges with. And because of his jump pack, I assumed he would buff Raptors and Warp Talons, which he kind of does. But I thought it would be more along the lines of Raptor Lord. Friendly Raptors and Warp Talons that charge a unit within 6 inches of Harkin can reroll failed charges, rerolling any or all of the dice. Because he's a leader, he should inspire his subordinates. Harkin should roll with his patrol, strike from the sky, and lead them into combat. There's a logical reason I had these assumptions. You see, this year's FAQs have nerfed melee deep strike hard, to say the least. Even if you do go first, if you deep strike a melee focused unit and charge without any rules to support the charging roll, the odds are that your charge will fail, meaning your melee specialists will appear and basically stand around in their cool poses as your opponent has their way with them. So the announcement of what appeared to be a jump pack lord, a character which appears is going to support jump pack infantry, being introduced into the meta that has been nerfing Deep Strike all year, it seemed reasonable to assume that said character's rules would keep the state of Deep Strike and melee in mind when designing his mechanics. So I think my expectations were pretty fair, and given the reactions to his rules online, it seems everyone else felt the same way. But at the very least, his model is spectacular. You could just use him as a base to make a dope Night Lord's Chaos Lord with jump pack, using Claws of the Black Hunt. Or maybe wait for the next Vigilus campaign book. In the narrative, Harkin's appearance closes out the events of this book, and considering Chaos got no specialist attachments either, I suspect that the arrival of the Black Legion on Vigilus will lead to the next campaign book offering Chaos some specialist attachments. which might cause Harkin to make more sense once he's in his specialist attachment. Well, that brings this Thoughts On to an end. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button. There's also a subscribe button and a bell button, so you can hit those if you want to help this channel grow. What I want to know is, how are you guys enjoying the new mission format from Chapter Approved? Feel free to leave a comment below. See you all next time.